Hey guys, welcome back! The Scorch shot. As iconic and memorable as it is hated and despicable, this faustian flare gun is a quick and easy way to kickstart some pretty fiery discussions on ye olde Reddit. It's a side-grade secondary that sends out scorching shots that send screeching snipers sniveling back to spawn. But the question I bring before you all today in hopes of a somewhat balanced discussion is this. Is this blistering bombardment really as unfair and overpowered as the consensus would suggest? Is it nothing more than a pimple on the forehead of TF2, or a malignant tumor getting ready to suck the meta dry? To do that, we first have to agree on what overpowered means, because everyone has a different answer. For the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to define it as any unlockable weapon that does not have sufficient counterplay is overpowered. Just to name one example, the brass beast is an unlockable primary for heavy that does way more damage than stock per bullet. You get this thing revved up, you shred enemies within nanoseconds. But don't be fooled. Almost nobody equips this thing because it spins up so slowly and reduces your move speed while shooting to a crawl. Heavies prefer being able to quickly rev and unrev their guns and do not like anything that slows them down even more, so the brass beast generally sits at the bottom of the weapon pile for most. Even so, it provides a situational upside in defensive situations where movement isn't as important, and when the enemy has to come to you, the brass beast can really shine. Against a brass beast heavy, you just have to wait for him to unrev for whatever reason, and he's pretty much toast, as it takes him so long to start shooting again that by the time he starts hitting you, most of his health will be gone. So does the Scorch shot have sufficient counterplay? Let's find out. It's a flare gun, so naturally its main draw is the ability to set enemies on fire from a distance. It explodes on contact with the ground, lighting all enemies within a splash radius on fire. So far, so good. But the Scorch shot does not explode when it hits an enemy. It bounces off and then explodes once it hits the ground, meaning that every direct hit with the Scorch shot has a chance to hit the target a second time with the explosion. The bouncing flare and explosion really incentivize using this thing against clusters of enemies, since it can easily light 5 or 6 people on fire all at once if you just shoot the guy in the middle of the group one time. But the flare on its own doesn't do all that much damage, aside from the afterburn, and here is where the Scorch shot starts to be a problem for so many people. The Scorch shot does mini crits versus players who are already burning, rewarding you for consecutive hits with more damage. All the other flares do this, but what makes the Scorch shot different is that it has a built-in double hit mechanic. You are almost guaranteed to deal mini crit damage to anyone you shoot with a Scorch shot flare because every flare hits the enemy twice, almost every time. First with the direct hit that lights them on fire, and then with the explosion which will deal mini crit damage. But the Scorch shot isn't done. There is one more upside to using this thing, and that is knockback. Every flare from the Scorch shot is guaranteed to knock the enemy it hits around, usually straight up in the air, but it varies. It's like a ranged air blast. You hit an enemy, they hop up in the air for a second, which is funny if you imagine them like cartoon characters freaking out about being on fire. The knockback would just be annoying, except for one thing. The Scorch shot has increased knockback on burning targets. So to recap, we have a flare gun that lights people on fire, explodes, deals knockback, does mini crit damage versus burning players, and does additional knockback versus burning players. If you just light somebody on fire with a flamethrower, switch to Scorch shot and shoot them once, you mini crit them, send them flying in an unpredictable direction, and then mini crit them a second time once the bouncing flare hits the ground, and all the while they are suffering from afterburn. This item does so many different things all at once, and the sheer utility of long distance decently damaging crowd control is often too much for pyromanes to pass up, especially with how devastating it is against snipers. Look at this clip here. My team is pushing the cart, and the red team is setting up a defense with an engineer, heavy, demo man, and scout. I round the corner and set the heavy engineer and scout on fire. I then shoot the enemy with the Scorch shot, which sends him flying away from the objective and basically forces him to retreat. Meanwhile, the bouncing flare falls and lights the demo man on fire, forcing him to back off. I shoot a second flare to scare the scout into running away, and by now I wouldn't be exaggerating to say that with a few flames and 2 flares, I basically held the entire red team off the point, allowing us to capture it. The heavy dies of afterburn, and I'm able to continue using the air blast and the Scorch shot to disallow anyone from leaving this building. But hold on just a minute, doesn't the Scorch shot have downsides? Why aren't you talking about those? How does it balance out the thing's many upsides? The downside of the Scorch shot is a 35% damage penalty. Okay, so it does less damage than the flare gun and detonator, but the bouncing flare and explosion plus the mini crit damage means you'll easily outdamage both the detonator and flare gun in any game without even really trying. It also has a 35% reduction in self-damage force, meaning you can't explosive jump as far with a Scorch shot, but these often don't matter. What does matter is counterplay. How do you fight against a pyro using this thing? Use the man melter. That's it, that's all you need to do. The Man Melter is probably the most underrated Scorch Shot counter in the entire game. Just stay with your team, and as soon as a Hot Shot Scorch Shot Pyro main rolls up, hold right click to rapidly and continuously extinguish every burning teammate within reach while also being rewarded with crits. You can even see me doing this in my Man Melter video, just nullifying the Scorch Shot's damage output and gaining crits in return. Not to mention the 20 health for extinguishing mechanic, which means that a Scorch Shot Happy Pyro main is giving you constant small health boosts. So yeah, the Scorch Shot does have counterplay, in that you can utterly neuter its effects by equipping the right weapon and paying attention. By my own definition, and it hurts to say this because I do not like this weapon, it is not overpowered. Snipers can equip the danger shield to counter it, and any source of healing like medics, dispensers, or the payload cart also reduces the Scorch Shot to an annoyance at best. It's a balanced weapon, he said through gritted teeth. I would love to see the Scorch Shot reworked into something less annoying, but given the multiple options and counterplay available when fighting against it, I have to admit that it is not too strong. So yeah, that's my take on the Scorch Shot. Annoying, obnoxious, really easy to use, but not overpowered. That's all. Like, subscribe, and get out. Video's over.